upright and loving service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose history is established as an irrevocable fact. Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurumilitam yena tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. I was born in the darkest and my spiritual masters opened talking about and all the different amazing things of what they're telling about Krishna himself. I'm going to be reading the first paragraph only because that is what we're going to be covering today as part of the verses that we're supposed to do today. And then we will recite the verse 1 and we'll go into the most important subject matter that we'll come to. Disclaimers, it's going to be a little heavy. This chapter describes the history of Maharaj Nabhaga, of his son Nabhaga, and of Maharaj Ambarish. So basically the context is coming into the point of Maharaj Ambarish and his activities being talked about. And so there's a little bit of context before that. The son of Manu was Nabhaga, and his son Nabhaga lived for many years in the Gurukul. In Nabhaga's absence, his brother did not consider his share of the kingdom, but instead divided the property among themselves. When Nabhaga returned home, his brother bestowed upon him their father as his share. But when Nabhaga went to his father and told him about the dealings of the brothers, his father informed him that this was cheating and advised him that for his livelihood, he should go to the sacrificial arena and describe 2 mantras to be chanted there. Nabhaga executed the orders of his father, and thus Angira and other great saintly persons gave him all the money collected in that sacrifice. To test Nabhaga, Lord Shiva challenged his claim to the wealth, but when Lord Shiva was satisfied by Nabhaga's behavior, Lord Shiva offered him all the riches. So let's go to the verse 1. And we're going to recite that first, and then we'll discuss. Do you have that verse open? Verse 1. If you have open. Shri Sukha Uvacha Nabhago Nagabha Patyam Yam Tatam Bharata Kavitam Avishtam Avyabhajandayam Brahmacharinam Agatam Shri Sukha Uvacha Nabhago Nabhagapatyam. Next line.
Yam tatam pratara kavim Yavishtam vyabhajantayam
Yavishtam ajantantam. Next one.
Brahmacharinam agatam.
Brahmacharinam agatam. Shri Sukha Uvacha
Nabhago Nabhagapatyam
Nabhago Nabhagapatyam
Yam tatam bharatara kavim
Dantavam Bharatam Kavim
Yavishtam Vyabhajandayam
Yavishtam Yadantayam
Brahmacharinam agatam.
Brahmacharinam Agatam.
Shri Sukha Uvacha
Shri Sukha Uvacha
Nabhago
Nabhago
Nabhagapatyam
Nabhagapatyam
Yam tatam bharata kavim
Yam Tatam Bharatam Kavim
Yavishtam vyabhajandayam
Yavishtam Yavajantayam Brahmacharinam Agatam. Shri Sukha Uvacha Nabhago Nabhagapatyam
Yam tatam bharata kavim
Tatam Bharata Kavim Yavishtam Yavajantayam Brahmacharinam Agatam. You want to say that? Okay, thank you. Let's go over the translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki Shri Sukha Uvacha. Shri Sukadev Goswami said, Nabaga Apatyam was the son of Maharaj Nabaga, Yam, onto whom Tatam, the father, Bharata, the elder brothers, Kavim, the learned, Yavishtam, the youngest, Vyabhajan, divided, Dayam, the property, Brahmacharinam, have accepted the life of Brahmachari perpetually, Naishtika Agatam, return. Shri Sukadev Goswami said, the son of Nabaga, named Nabaga, lived for a long time at the place of his spiritual master. Therefore, his brothers thought that he was not going to become a grahastha and would not return. Consequently, without providing a share for him, they divided the property of their father among themselves. When Nabaga returned from the place of his spiritual master, they gave him their father as his share. There are two kinds of brahmacharis. One may return home, marry, and become a householder, whereas the other, whom known as Brahadvrita, takes a vow of remaining brahmachari perpetually. The Brahadvrita brahmachari does not return from the place of the spiritual master. He stays there, and later he directly takes sannyas. Because Nabaga did not return from the place of his spiritual master, his brothers thought that he had taken Brahadvrita brahmacharya. Therefore, they did not prepare his share. And when he returned, they gave him their father as his share. So today's conversation, we're going to be discussing about brahmacharya overall. But before we start all of that, we'll just put in a little bit of context. The fragrance is so beautiful that it's distracting me. Okay, so basically let's understand, right? There are 4 varnas and there are 4 ashramas. We know that. And we will read a couple of purports that Srila Prabhupada has given in order to explain what each of them means, in a sense, like what it means for us. Let's put it that way. This entire system that has been created in the Vedic system has been created very thoughtfully by Krishna himself in such a way that everybody, no matter whom, gets a chance to be able to elevate themselves. Be able to come to the point of being able to cleanse themselves. First, the heart needs to be cleansed, everything needs to be cleansed, so that you're able to come to the point of complete surrender to Krishna. And when that complete surrender happens, that is when all the material miseries goes away. So all the system that we see is nothing but a gradual progression for all of that to happen. It's very similar to how what we see things in the education system. You're going from kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, so on and so forth. Then you do graduation, post-graduation, and I don't know how many PhDs you can do, right? In the corporate world, you start at the very junior associate level, then you keep going senior, you become director, you at some time becomes a CEO. All of these things has been created nothing but just for that gradual progression, and that is what we will understand. So what are these ashramas that is there? We'll start from the topmost. When I say topmost, I mean, from where we are supposed to be reaching is sannyasa. What Srila Prabhupada would explain, sannyasa is the renounced order of life. We understand that as an aspect. But what is the most critical aspect of a sannyasa ashram or that particular stage is complete control on your senses. Without that, senses does not exist. Like sannyasa does not exist. Complete control on your senses also leads to detachment. Okay? So sannyasi, a renounced order person, would come to a point of full control on their senses, which means they are completely 100% surrendered to the actions, like doing actions for the pleasure of Krishna and doing everything in Krishna consciousness. Like for example, they will not stay in one place for long, but would keep traveling in order to preach. They will continue to do their sadhana systems very strongly in order to set an example for others. That is a sannyasi who's renounced, who's given up everything. Their family, their wealth, their possessions, they say we don't own anything. What is a vanaprastha? We understand sannyasis, but what is a vanaprastha? Anybody? Yes, Prabhu?
It's like a pre-stage of sannyas of doing austerities in the forest.
Okay, good point. So when we say vanaprastha, yes, vana means forest, and one who's living in the forest is vanaprastha, but not necessarily always the stepping stone for a sannyas. Okay, so vanaprastha are ones who have also got full control on their senses. They have given up the attachments to any materialistic life. So what that means is they're not engaged in any activities of getting material wealth or engaged in any sorts of material duties towards their family or anybody else. What are they doing? They've renounced materialistic activities to the extent of reducing their footprint so small that, okay, I'm going to live in a little small hut, but they will also keep traveling around in order to preach and all of those things they will do. They will not have a lot of opulence with them, right? But they will also dedicate themselves completely to the service of Krishna and nothing else. So let's take an example so that it gets clear. His Holiness Bhakti Marg Swami Maharaj, he's a sannyasi. He's renounced everything. His Grace Vaishekri Prabhu, or my Guru Maharaj, His Grace Sankarshan Dasati will be categorized as the vanaprasthas as it exists in Kali Yuga, because they have given up everything else and 100% taken Krishna consciousness. A sannyasi, on the other hand, would have left even the wife. But they are engaging completely, practically leaving their wives also, like in all practical aspects, and fully engaging themselves into Krishna consciousness. So that's the vanaprastha. That's the only difference. Okay. Next are the grahasthas. The grahasthas, there are two words that you might have already heard, grahastha and grahamedi. Let's talk of grahasthas. A grahastha is also somebody who is supposed to be controlled in their senses. Right? Not 100% to the level of a sannyasi or a vanaprastha, but controlled in their activities. They follow all the rules and regulations of the Vedic scriptures and they lead their life accordingly. They also would be engaged in Krishna conscious activities, but one of their prime responsibilities also is to support the other three ashramas. A sannyasi, a vanaprastha, and also a brahmachari. They support them. So that is, if things have been followed properly, then a grahastha ashram is an ashram. If that principles of sense control and Krishna conscious activities is not being followed, then you become a grahamedi, which means somebody who is caught in the material world, in the family life. So these people will be doing, grahasthas will also be doing the materialistic duties of doing something to gain wealth and be able to use that wealth into Krishna's service. The final and the most important theme for today will be the brahmacharis. The brahmachari ashram is a student life where you are learning. The learning is the most important aspect of a brahmachari life. They do not have control on their senses so far, but that is what they are learning. They do not have detachment from the materialistic life, but that is what they are learning. So a brahmachari ideally is the one who is actually going through that learning processes. If that learning process is not happening, if there is no teacher, then there is no brahmachari ashram. Okay? And we will dive into that for today. And then from brahmachari ashram, we will talk about the two paths that Prabhupada has talked about in the purport. Prabhu, if you are able to follow up and find the purports that I'm going to read out real quick, wonderful. Otherwise, I have that printed out just for convenience. I'm going to Canto 1, Chapter 9, verse 26. 1:9:26. This is where Srila Prabhupada is talking about what does the principles of brahmacharya life is going to be. 1:9:26. 9:26. So I'm starting from the Varna. The Varnas are, so to speak, classifications of different occupations, and the Ashrama Dharma is gradual progression on the path of self-realization. Both are interrelated, and one is dependent on the other. The main purpose of Ashrama Dharma is to awaken knowledge and detachment. The Brahmacharya ashram is the training ground for the prospective candidates. In this ashrama, it is instructed that this material world is not actually the home of the living entity. The conditioned soul under the material bondage are prisoners of matter, and therefore self-realization is the ultimate aim of life. The whole system of ashrama dharma is meant for detachment. One who fails to assimilate the spirit of detachment is allowed to enter into family life with the same spirit of detachment. Therefore, one who attains detachment may at once adopt the fourth order, namely renounced, and thus live on charity only, not to accumulate wealth, but to just keep the body and soul together for ultimate realization. Householder life is for one who is attached, and the vanaprastha and sannyasi orders of life are for those who are detached from material life. The brahmacharya ashram is specially meant for training both attachment and detachment. So that is where Srila Prabhupada is talking about the definition of what these ashramas are. We talked about that right now. But in Brahmacharya ashram in particularly, what is that we are trying to learn is the fact that material world is not our home. Trying to understand the difference between what material world and material life means with respect to spiritual life. What is the most essential knowledge to be able to come to this understanding? Even in Bhagavad Gita, that is the very first set of knowledge that Krishna starts giving. Yes, Prabhu?
That we are spirit souls.
Correct. The difference between the body and the soul. Understanding that anything associated with the body will be categorized as material and is temporary in nature, and anything associated with the eternal identity of us as an eternal soul is spiritual in nature and the ultimate aim of life. That basic principle understanding is one of the takeaways of a brahmachari life. If that takeaway does not come in, or that takeaway is not being taught or emphasized as part of a brahmacharya life, then the brahmacharya life is not going in the right path. Now, a disclaimer, and to understand this, when we say brahmachari, there is another term that gets very closely talked about is brahmacharini. When we say brahmachari as a student life, we are not talking about the gender of the body. It is purely on a spiritual level. Everything that we are going to be talking about applies to both a male body and a female body. So this concept of understanding of the science of difference between a body and a soul applies to everybody and is the most essential thing. Srila Prabhupada is very importantly emphasizing is that Brahmacharya ashram is meant for learning the process of detachment. Now understand this. Brahmacharya level is the teaching level. We talked about Grahastha, Vanaprastha and Sannyasis also. That was one thing which is common. Is that level of detachment from the materialistic life. That is, this Brahmacharya ashram is the foundation stone. It is where the foundation is provided. Right? This process of detachment needs to be learned with the process of attachment. Detachment and attachment happens together. We have talked about this multiple times. Srila Prabhupada has given these examples a lot of times that you cannot detach yourself from the material world without attaching yourself to Krishna. Because that attachment to Krishna is what practically actually leads to detachment. So, that process of detachment has to be learned with the process of attachment. That is what Brahmacharya life is. Now, before we go into 7.12 as the chapter, we will go to the index only of it. This Brahmacharya life is, as we said, is the founding stone. Now, let's talk of, apart from what we have observed. A child or a person who has been trained very well from the very childhood, that characteristic of discipline and that character of being consistent and good behavior and all of the other characteristics that we talk about, if that has been coming into the child from the very beginning, that we can see in their childhood, can see in their youth, and will also see that in the old age. So in brahmacharya life, all of these aspects that we're going to be talking about becomes critical, extremely essential, because that is what is going to lead us to the next ashrams based on the path that Srila Prabhupada has given us and the scriptures actually gave us. So it is very important in the student life to emphasize on this. And just to clarify, student life in the Vedic context is not equated to student life in the material world. Does not mean you're still in school or college or anywhere else. Then is when you will be called a brahmachari. A brahmachari is still when you're still learning the science of self-realization. Okay. So what is this life of a brahmachari supposed to be like? We will read a couple of verses from Canto 7, verse 12. That is where this interesting science is talked about. Text verse, it says, Narada Muni said, a student should practice completely controlling his senses. He should be submissive and should have an attitude of firm friendship for the spiritual master. With a great vow, the brahmachari should live at the Gurukul only for the benefit of Guru. Multiple points being talked about here, very important. First is the controlling of senses. That is the most essential. Without controlling of senses, life is not in control. Okay? He should have submissive attitude towards the Guru. And there's also talked about submissive and firm friendship. Submissive attitude means I submit to you, please correct me. I submit to you with my questions and you give me the answer and I follow the instructions as given in that. Friendship behavior with a guru would mean being open and revealing what's happening in your heart, very confidently exposing all yourself and saying, this is what I'm doing. Is it right or wrong? Not trying to hide something. Right? To the spiritual master, a guru can be your Siksha Guru or a Diksha Guru. This applies to all of them. Traditionally, the student will go, the brahmachari will go and live to the initiating guru's place for a long time. We have seen so many examples, like Krishna also going to Sandipan Muni's place and learning over there the science. The holistic science, the complete knowledge was given to them based on what they're supposed to be doing in their life. Okay, next verse it says, at both junctions of day and night, namely in the early morning and in the evening, he should fully absorb in thoughts of the spiritual master, fire, the sun god, and Lord Vishnu, and by chanting the Gayatri mantra, he should worship them. Basically, morning, evening, every time be engaged. Now, when you get second initiated, that is when you start doing the Gayatri chantings. But at least the remembering of the spiritual master and focusing on him. What does that mean? When we say you're supposed to be always absorbed in the thoughts of the spiritual master, it means always remembering the instructions given to you by them. It always means that you're supposed to be following. Did I do in the morning? Why is it saying morning and evening? In the morning, let's remember that I have to lead my day to day as per the instructions of my Guru. What are the instructions? What am I supposed to be doing? All right. In the evening, it is self-introspection time. Did I do my day as per the instructions of my Guru or not? That is an important aspect of a brahmachari. That is how we learn. That is how we will identify mistakes. Let's go to the verse 3. Being called by the spiritual master, the student should study the Vedic mantras regularly. Every day before beginning his studies and at the end of the studies, the disciple should respectfully offer obeisances to the spiritual master. What Srila Prabhupada has given us a program is incorporating all of these things. In the morning, we get up, we do the Guru Puja, we're doing that, we're doing the Srimad Bhagavatam classes. In the evening also, there are some classes, like most of the temples would have a Bhagavad Gita class or something happening. So all of these programs that has been given to us is actually meant for our training purposes only. And all of them is essential. It is supposed to be done. Right? Carrying pure kusa grass in his hand, the brahmachari should dress regularly with a belt of straw and with deerskin garments. He should wear matted hair, carry a rod and water pot, and be decorated with a sacred thread as recommended by the Shastras. What does this mean in our context of how Srila Prabhupada has given us this verse? What it means is that, okay, we're supposed to be dressing up as Vaishnavas, doing a Vaishnava attire. Okay? It is very important, it is very helpful. And I can give you a couple of examples on that also. But what it also means is austerities. When it is saying that you're supposed to be carrying a rod, a water pot, having matted hair is a symbolism of saying that we are not spending too much time on self-care. We are not too much absorbed into how am I looking. When it talks about that you should dress regularly with the belt of straw and the deer skin, which means absolutely simple. Don't try and be opulent as a brahmachari for sure. And when you're trained as a brahmachari to do that, we will carry that forward as a teaching and a practice always throughout our life. The idea basically over here is that cut off the distraction. And it's not, what is the distraction here? I'll give you a very good example of that. If you come to me and say 10 minutes, let's go somewhere, right? And we're going for a 3-day tour somewhere, whatever, right? I'm going to panic. In 10 minutes? Wait, I'm supposed to be packing my laptop, my phone, I have to pick the charger. Oh, where are my clothes? I have to pick them up. And what about this and what about that? There's so many things. In a student life, on the contrary, a brahmachari properly being trained to stay in the temple will be able to do that in 2 minutes. Why? Because all they have to carry is, and I'm telling you this by seeing an example. I was with Gurudev, we were doing these travels to different cities, and there's this brahmachari who was in Montreal temple, and he decided that I want to listen to Gurudev even more. So he decided, I'm going to travel with you all. So we were supposed to be coming from Montreal to Ottawa and then Toronto, and there were multiple programs over here. And in 5 minutes, he decided, okay, I'm going to do this. He went into the room, picked up his sleeping bag and one dhoti kurta, and I'm ready to go. A brahmachari life is supposed to be that simple, not overly complicated, right? Always ready to be on the move, always keeping things simple and not overly complicating things. Because when we complicate things, then that distracts us, that stops us from being able to do and leverage the opportunity that we are getting, right? Austerities is very essential part of being a brahmachari. Austerities means that you're supposed to be keeping things difficult for yourself, even if it is purposefully with the objective of trying to be simple and have sense control. There's so many different amazing brahmacharis that unfortunately I was not trained properly. I never, in the ISKCON context, never stayed in the temple and never got trained in that. And I really, really, really wish I was. Because we see the difference about that, right? So very well trained brahmachari. As I was saying, simple, easy to go. Like they're also training themselves to saying, okay, how am I going to sleep? Okay, I was telling this example of the brahmachari from Montreal. He picked up his sleeping bag. Why? He's saying, I don't need any space to sleep. Because a very well trained brahmachari is the one who will sleep on the floor always. Okay, in the maximum they take is this yoga mat or that black thing that we've kept in the room, and that a sleeping bag, and good. That is the training that is needed. You don't need special, like, oh, there's no proper bed, so I cannot stay here, so I cannot do this, so I cannot do that. A brahmachari, he's like, I'll sit in your car, I'll go wherever you are going, and wherever you are sleeping, right below over there, I'll put down my sleeping bag and I will sleep. I don't need special arrangements. That's a well-trained brahmachari. I tried to do that for 2 days when I was there. And yeah, I felt it. Because, again, my training is somewhere in between of being able to take austerities, having lived in hostel, having, kept myself to a little strictness, but not to that level. Okay. So that is one example. Like there are brahmacharis who are also training themselves for sense control in the sense of saying, okay, only once in temple, the prasadam is opulent when it's offered to the Lord, and that makes it difficult for us to have control on our tongue, on the taste of things, right? So they keep themselves so strict and saying only once a month I'm going to eat sweet, otherwise I'm not going to. That's the kind of austerities which is needed to be able to come to a sense control. As I said, it applies to both brahmacharis and brahmacharinis. That austerities, without that austerities, you will not be able to learn, or I will not be able to learn about sense control and being able to be that humble person. Oh, you did not make good arrangements for me. I can stay anywhere. That is the brahmachari training. I'll give one more example just for the context. Again, from this Montreal trip, right? When this brahmachari we picked up, there was another brahmachari who was traveling with Gurudev, who's his personal servant, and so on and so forth. There were 3 brahmacharis in my car. We're coming from Ottawa now, and I live in Scarborough, and all these 3 were supposed to be going to Brampton. So when you're coming, I've reached home, but in order to drop them ideally to Brampton, I will have to go to Brampton and come back. It was getting very late. And I decided, let's do this. They're my younger brothers. As a grahastha, I'm supposed to be taking care of the brahmacharis also. Okay, so we got down on the 401 in Scarborough. I booked them an Uber till Brampton, thinking that I'm doing the right thing of taking care of them, as a grahastha is supposed to be doing. What happens next day? I'm chastised by my Guru Mata, saying you're spoiling the brahmacharis. A brahmachari, what is this booking Uber, spending money on Uber for them? They're supposed to be taking the public transport. They got a ride from Ottawa till Scarborough. They're lucky. They're supposed to be austere. They're supposed to be not just... It's not about spending money or saying, do we have the budget or not? Her point was, and which is very relevant, is saying, as a brahmachari, if you're just going and riding Ubers here and there, then you're not going and interacting with people and trying to preach and then come back and saying, hey, that person challenged me with a certain question. I don't know the answer of that. Let me find. Those opportunities are lost. If His Holiness Bhakti Swami Maharaj was not trained in that way, he would not have been walking across Canadas and preaching. That's where the training is translating into practical actions. So this austerity is very important. When you go back to your rooms, look at your room. Is this a brahmachari room or is this a grahastha room? Make a self-introspection. Nobody's going to make a comment on that. Right? So that is important for us. If there is some service opportunity coming in, the temple can afford saying, okay, go take an Uber, do this and come back. But as a brahmachari says, no, austerities. I will go in a public transport, take my time and come back, no worries. Yes, doing everything intelligently, factor of time and everything also comes into the picture, doing all of that intelligently, but that austerity is needed. If we are austere in the brahmachari life, in the very beginning of the things, then our spiritual life is guaranteed success. Okay? So, let's talk of the other thing, where Srila Prabhupada talks about other type of austerities and getting deeper into what these austerities mean. We're going to Canto 3, chapter 21, verse 45 to 47, the purport of it. 3:21-45. Srila Prabhupada here is saying, here are some descriptions of a brahmachari yogi. In the morning, the first duty of a brahmachari seeking spiritual elevation is hutasana, to offer sacrificial oblations to the Supreme Lord. Those engaged in brahmacharya cannot sleep until 7 or 9 in the morning. They must rise early in the morning, at least 1.5 hours before the sunrise, and offer oblations. Or on this age, they must chant the holy names of the Lord, Hare Krishna, as referred to the Lord by Lord Chaitanya, Kalo nasti eva nasti eva nasti eva nasti gatirannatha. There is no other alternative in this age to chanting the holy names of the Lord. The brahmachari must rise early in the morning and after placing himself should chant the holy names of the Lord. From the very features of the sage, it appeared that he had undergone great austerities. That is the signs of one observing brahmacharya, the vow of celibacy. If one lives otherwise, it will be manifest in the lust visible in the face and body. The word Vidyotamanam indicates that the brahmachari feature shows in his body. That is the certificate that one has undergone great austerities in yoga. A drunkard or a smoker or sex monger cannot be eligible to practice yoga. First thing, waking up early in the morning. Second, chanting and getting engaged in services. And also following the regulative principles, celibacy being one of the most important one. Right? These are very important aspects of a brahmachari life. These are the very important principles. Now, we have to understand this. We have a tendency to make things easy for us. When Srila Prabhupada came to the Western world, the Westerners were not ready for such a lifestyle. He was incorporating in the sense that, okay, I'm not even telling you about regulative principles about anything. Just come, listen, chant, hear. But they did not stay at that level. He did not let them stay at that level. These were the hippies whom he turned into sannyasis, the happies. They did not stay at that level. That's what is to be understood. When we are entering, even when we are kind of raising a child, and when you were a kid, at some stage the parent would be like, it's just a child, let it be, it's okay. There's some relaxations given, some concessions given. All right, you can wake up a little, right, when it's chanting time, go to sleep again. For the kids who come for Mangal Aarti, when they're able to come to, then during chanting time, when it gets a little silent, they doze off again. Fine, it's okay. You're in grade 1, chant only 1 round, grade 2, chant 2 rounds, whatever, right? The question important to us is, yes, we have been given concessions, is as a kid, when do we grow ourselves and become the adult and start taking responsibilities and start following the principles as how it is supposed to be? As a brahmachari, maybe you are given relaxations in the beginning. Sure, Mangal Aarti 5:30. But when you grow up, when will I grow up to the point of saying, let's do it like the adults? That's the question that we have to ask ourselves. And that is the question about all of these austerities. In the starting, maybe there is a little bit of relaxation, but we always have to understand the required standards and aim for it. Brahmachari life is learning. Can learning come without identifying the gaps? That where you don't know what is that has to be learned? Can brahmachari life of always evolving and increasing ourselves in consciousness happen without saying where the deficit is? It cannot. So, keep the benchmark right there. It is okay if we are here. There is no problem for us to be lower than where the highest level of benchmark is supposed to be. But the eye should always be up. Always looking, that is where I have to go. Not being comfortable in the current position. Right? Life has to be a static. Krishna consciousness process is a static. If you become stagnant in one place, you become static, not a static. And a stagnant pond stinks. Not good. So as a brahmachari, or for that matter, even otherwise also, because as I said, the process of brahmachari applies, the principles that we learn in brahmachari applies above also. The difference is you have learned that and you're practicing that versus in brahmachari you're learning. So it's okay. So this concept of continuous self-evaluation of saying what is that I can do next now to go to the next level, improve more, has to continuously happen. In a week, I'm being able to attend Mangal Aarti once, then I'm attending twice, then I am. Everything has to always gradually keep increasing in levels and standards. Applies to everybody, including myself. Right? Let's go to the next part, which is 276. Again, in the purport of 276, there are two different paragraphs, one in the beginning of the purport and one towards the end that we're going to read. 276 purport. In the rigid life of tapasya, there is no place for association of women. So as austerities, tapasya, all of that we were talking about, it goes to the next level. I think it's in the starting only, Prabhu, somewhere. 276. So Srila Prabhupada is talking about that austerities and penances needs to be done. And that is needed by everybody to achieve success in self-realization. But this tapasya in particular, he's talking about celibacy. For male-bodied devotees, association with female-bodied devotees. And for female-bodied devotees, association with male-bodied devotees is also one of those tapasyas. Why is that being told? This is very important. We are in the material world. We cannot think ourselves to be like, we cannot underestimate the power of Maya. Sure, very good. There's a devotee, everybody. But that desire, you never know when it creeps in and it makes you fall down. Don't let that happen. Do we have an example? Where just by looking, things, yes, Prabhu. Fantastic, thank you so much. Ajamil. All going very good. Just by looking of a man and a woman associating with each other, not even doing it himself, just by looking at that, he fell down. A very important lesson for all of us. Why is this concept of, you guys be on the right side, you be on the left side, don't do this, don't do that, don't stay in a room alone, blah, 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 blah. So many different rules and regulations. Why is all of that there? Is it to restrict, bind people? It is to liberate. We have to understand this concept very importantly, right? Rules and regulations seems to be binding. But following rules and regulations leads to freedom. It also applies to the material world. You follow the rules of a country, you are a free citizen. You don't follow them, you're in the jail. You follow the rules and regulations of the material world, you are a free person. Otherwise, you are binded by it. So these restrictions are meant only to help us, because that sense control will come in that place. Now I'll read, I removed that. I think it's probably in somewhere else. Where Srila Prabhupada is talking about, towards the end of the same purport. Let me read that one first. The brahmachari or a boy from the age of 5 years, especially from the higher caste, namely the scholarly parent, the brahmanas, the administrative parents, the kshatriyas, or the mercantile or productive parents, the vaishyas, is trained until 25 years of age under the care of a bona fide guru or teacher. And under strict observance of discipline, he comes to understand the values of life, along with taking specific training for a livelihood. The brahmachari is then allowed to go home and enter household life and get married to a suitable woman. But there are many brahmacharis who do not go home to become householders but continue the life as Naishtika brahmachari without any connection with women. They accept the order of sannyasa or renounced order of life following the combination with women is an unnecessary burden that checks self-realization. So this is where we are kind of going in towards the next part of the conversation also. But you see, again and again, there's so many different places that brahmachari, celibacy. Srila Prabhupada will talk of that again and again and again. That is an important aspect. It is an important aspect because once we have trained ourselves in the brahmachari life to be celibate, then we are able to do the grahastha ashram and not become grahamedi, because there are regulative principles with the grahastha also engaging into sexual activities. Then sannyasa and vanaprastha is impossible without having that kind of a control. So that control, if it is not learned in the very beginning, when it's relatively easier, when there's a child, 5 years, it talks about it from the age of 5 years old, there's no sex drive at that time. At that moment of time, from that moment of time itself, when the training starts coming in, it becomes easier. The Britishers, they came to India and they destroyed the entire culture because that is what their motive was. We used to have what is now being termed as child marriage. But that was the Vedic system. Why? Because once you've got married at an age before you have been getting those sex drive, then you're already committed to a person And you're already committed to a relationship without that additional factor coming into the picture. What Srila Prabhupada talks about is happening in today's age is now before the time you get even married, you've already had interaction with X number of opposite genders. And now when you get married, you're always in a mode of comparison. Oh man, whom did I marry? XYZ was better. Right? So that comparison keeps happening and that commitment is not coming in. And that is why a marriage at an earlier age was recommended at that time. The way the nature has, the entire nature as we see it is creation of the Lord Himself, and that knows what is the best. How the body operates, when the body gets mature enough and ready for a certain things, all of that is kind of an indication of what should happen at what age. Right? But anyways, so when this control is happening, now as a brahmachari, this is where the segregation now starts coming in, unfortunately, is between a brahmachari and a brahmacharini. For a brahmachari, the boy, now they have two options. Is to continue the path of being brahmachari, now become a naishtiki brahmachari, not getting married completely. Okay? Srila Prabhupada recommends that as being the path because he's saying, why take the long path of going from a brahmachari to a grihastha and then a sannyasi, when from a brahmachari you can directly go to sannyasi? If you have been able to come to that point of sense control, good. From a brahmacharini, on the other hand, Srila Prabhupada talks about that and the Vedic scriptures talk about that they will always enter the grihastha ashram. And from there, depending on what the situation is, they can enter vanaprastha with the husband or, different ways. So there is no check to the spiritual growth of anybody. It's just different paths recommended for different people, right? Because the Vedic scripture talks about there being need of protection for women always. Without protection, it's not best. So with these two options is what the verse is also talking about is you have two options now to either take this path or that path, but ultimately everything is leading to the same aspect of things. So the verse over here, when we are talking about, let's go back to that and put that into context also. Nabhaga, now he is there with his spiritual master in the brahmachari ashram. And because he's decided to stay over there for a little longer, getting trained better, it was thought that he's going to become a naishtiki brahmachari and not going to come back. And so, share of property, everything was not there. So now you see this as a difference. When he now comes back, that little difference of the duration of training is what is showing the difference. Even if both were trained, the earlier sons and this who's coming later, Nabhaga, even though they are both trained as brahmacharis nicely, but the duration and the sincerity of their training is now showing in. One set of the brothers, now they're saying, he's not there, let's just take the wealth and forget about him. And even when he comes back and realizes, oops, we made a mistake, they're not correcting the mistake, but saying, go, father is your wealth, go take him. Versus the other side, when he's saying, oh, you're saying father is my wealth? That's fine. Very good. I'll take whatever you're giving me. I'm going to take care of my father, etc., etc. You see the difference of attitude. That attitude is the difference, which is this level of detachment for materialistic things that is coming as part of the brahmacharya training. Then, after that also, when he's saying, okay, father, I'm going to take care of you, come with me, and all of those conversation is happening, he's being told that, no, I'm not your wealth. A father cannot be your wealth. Right? And then he's instructed and go do this, go to such and such place, chant these mantras, etc., etc. Help them out. They're making mistakes again and again and not being able to attain the results of the yagyas that they're trying to do, and he follows the instructions of his father. That's another indication of a good brahmachari, that they have learned to follow instructions, be submissive in nature, that okay, maybe I think I assessed things wrong, father, you're telling me there is something else that I should be doing, I did it. Even when that was done, and now he's got the wealth, and Lord Shiva comes and challenges him, seeing Lord Shiva as the superior, he did not go and challenge him back and say, no, you are wrong, this is what has been told to me. He still took a humble position and went to his father saying, Father, this is what has happened. What do I do next? And Lord Shiva seeing that, that is where Vaishnava mercy starts coming into the picture. When you're showing the right characteristics of being trained properly and showing that humility and readiness to learn and accept instructions, that is when you get the biggest mercy of a Vaishnava. Right? So the training that we are talking about, austere trainings, all of these strict trainings, is something meant for our own good, for the overall spiritual benefit. We can keep getting digressed and distracted, but always remember, austerities, celibacies, being continuously always learning, being humble, all of these are very important characteristics that we are supposed to be learning in. There are so many tiny things that we have to learn of how a Vaishnava is supposed to be doing things. How do you wake up? When you start doing the training for being a pujari, you will get a full guide, and it will talk about when you wake up, you are supposed to be chanting a few mantras to offer your respects. Before you put your foot down from the bed, that is when you chant a few verses, and so on. As a brahmachari, you get trained to do all of those, you learn all of that, and then you learn, it becomes a habit, and you're doing that naturally always, and everything becomes natural. That is what is meant for. I'll take 2 minutes for real quick questions. I think we're at time, but any quick questions or challenges? Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, you were talking about how to not become static, because if we become static, then we're not growing.
Yes.
So, how can we actually in practical life look at ourselves and see that we are not becoming static or stagnant, and we are always aiming for growth?
Surrender to your authorities, to your guru, to your Diksha Guru, to your Siksha Guru, and they will instruct you to keep telling you where you are lacking, and follow those instructions, and you'll always keep growing. It's a pretty simple in ways in that sense. You had something.
Prabhuji, just a quick question. When you're in the secular world, you're working, and if there is this emphasis on self-care and self-love, and you've got all these people that are saying, that are literally, but this, when we are in Krishna consciousness and heavy duty into it, a couple of years into it, it's diametrically polar opposite, where you're not talking about self-love, you're trying to attach to the lotus feet of Krishna. So even at work, like, you might not really be classified as a fanatic, because you obviously, this is a very open movement for anybody, and Srila Prabhupada also didn't lead with 4 regulative principles, he led with just chant and be happy. He was very like public figure, inclusive. Right? Yeah. But it's like when you're sitting with a bunch of people and your employer is a sweetheart, right? They said no egg, no onion, no garlic for Kanika. But then you're obviously sitting in an office catering meal with people who are eating meat. You're not a fanatic. But then suddenly a conversation will pop up that, oh, okay, you're not having onion, garlic. And the most understanding people, I hate to say, will be Canadians and Americans. The Desis will go like, OMG, how are you eating? What the hell, what's wrong with you, And then slowly they start asking, okay, you've been here for a while and you're thinking initiation, they're like, oh, are your parents okay with it? And I'm like, my parents love it. They're like, nobody has a problem except you. So, but at the same time, like how you said, that the only way you're not static, like he was talking about, is when you're seeing, okay, am I increasing, am I doing enough seva, am I associating with devotees? So in my head, I'm trying to be very open and very inclusive, but at the same time, personally, I'm trying to make sure that I'm escalating in the right direction and having like fanatical standards for myself, not for others.
Absolutely.
Right? So how do you make sure you don't lose your sanity in the process?
Let's break that into 2 parts. First part is where you're talking about the world talks about self-care and so on. So do we. Yes. But we understand the definition of self. It's not the body. Beautiful. It's right? So we are also into self-care. We are also into self-preservation. We are also into self. But we understand who the self is. That's the first difference. Now, once that is understood, and once that solidly is situated into our hearts as the process, now let's talk about when talking to these different people. Again, everybody of us is working, associating with all the different people. When we become, we don't take association from them, we give them association. And how does that happen? Once you're solidly situated, you very intelligently, very beautifully are able to articulate and present things itself. Right? Everybody is eating something. Like I was there in Payments Canada Summit for 3 days, and they had lunch and buffets and all of this. And I'm there with my tiffin.
Right.
No problem.
Right.
What happens is, And like in the same way, I went to London, UK for 3 days, so something official, right? Everybody has this beautiful buffet, and I cooked in the morning in the hotel room and took it with me. How do you present this? It depends on, it's like your resume. You go to a job interview, you might have done tiny, but you can explode it, whatever, right? It's all on your presentation. You're eating, how's your food? Yeah, this is bland, this is. Yeah, see, that's why I prefer eating my own. It's presentation, right? Now, the people who are around me are getting envious. Man, there are just two options over there, man. It's better you got things of your own choice. You've changed the direction of it just because you're happy and contented from within, and now you're able to present it accordingly. So in all of these conversations about, conversation about somebody trying to tell you, you're insane, I said, what does insanity mean? Right? So in different ways, very lovingly, I said, I don't think it makes any sense for me to do 25 years of education to job 35 years and then be forgotten. What's the point of this education? In different ways, depending on your audience and depending what the circumstances is over there, you can very wittily present some things in a certain way that makes them envious. Right? The idea is not to make them jealous, but in the sense that, oh, you got something better, I want to do this. Right? So it's on your presentation. Like what the last purport that we were reading, right? It says, your happiness and your luster of the body itself will show the happiness that is within. And you don't need to describe anything. Like in the most stressful situation at workplace, if you are the one who's doing your work, smilingly still, happily coming, oh yeah, let's do another day of chaos at work, and then I have to do etc. things. This one question that is very commonly asked in the Canadian context at work. How was your weekend?
Yeah.
Right? Everybody has faced that question?
Yeah.
What do we say? Do we hesitate? I said, oh, I had such a blissful one. You know what? I went to 3 different temples and we were doing such amazing stuff over there. Do you know what is the kind of feast we had for Nashima Chaturdashi? I'm like, what? Right? What are you talking about? Going to temple, happiness? And the more with energy you are talking, the more convincing it gets. And the more energy you will have is the more convinced you are yourself. Right? So it is all related in that sense. All right, we'll stop. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Take the last one.
Last one. Okay. My question was about change. Like we always try to defeat our comfort zone and step out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it can be destructive, like the change. So how do we find like stability in that change?
When you're identifying that there is something you don't know and you're trying to get out of the comfort zone, it cannot lead to destruction unless you're trying to do it on your own without guidance. I don't know something. How do I do this? I'm struggling with something. When you're holding a railing, the side rails anywhere, and while walking, you'll never, even if you slip, you will not fall down. That is where a proper mentorship, and that is where the concept of a Siksha Guru and a Diksha Guru comes in very essential. Right? And that submissive behavior and surrendering yourself for correction becomes important. When you are and that is what a brahmachari life is supposed to be. Take yourself out of that comfort zone. Learn new things. Try it out. You will make mistakes. Even after doing it 1,000,000 times, you will make the mistake. Today I was doing the Guru Puja, right? Everything. I've done that so many different times. I'm doing Aarti every day at home, doing deity worship at home. I forgot the chamara. Prabhu came and he forgot. Oh, it happens. You have to be open and keep looking around also for that slight indications of people reminding you. If you're holding on to that railing, keeping your eyes open for people trying to give you a little hint that you've forgotten something, then you will never be unsuccessful. That attitude that, oh, I am perfect, no matter what, I'm doing it, and I'm doing it right, man, I'm just enjoying myself. If we get into that mode, when we make mistakes, then we'll not be able to see somebody else trying to correct us. It's very important. Right? Right? Thank you so much. Srila Prabhupada.